Alright, so if you guys bought the EMAX Tinyhawk 3 ready to fly kit and you're ready to move on to a larger quad, something a little bit faster maybe, if your skills have advanced, and you want to still use the same transmitter and goggles, well, I've got a couple of EMAX models that you can check out. There's the Nanohawk X, which is probably going to be your next step up here. It's going to be a bit faster than the Tinyhawk 3. And you can take it outside, it'll fly better in wind, definitely a little more agile, and you can do more kind of freestyle tricks and stuff like that with that. Also, later on, if you have advanced your skills and you're very confident flying the Nanohawk X, you could try out the Babyhawk II analog version. And so I'm going to talk about how to get the transmitter and goggles working with these two new models here. Now, I have videos on all these products already. I'll link those videos in the description below. So I'm not covering the details on these individual products. You'll get to see those down in the video description. There's going to be 3 videos: the review on the Ready to Fly kit, the review on the Nanohawk X, and the review on the Babyhawk II. But this video is primarily for those of you that have been asking me for a video on how to use the transmitter goggles on different models after you've outgrown the Tinyhawk 3 Whoop. So the nice thing about a lot of the EMAX models is their setup for the switches and the radio is consistent across most of the recent models. These instructions may not work with other brands of products. If you try and do this with like a Beta FPV or HGRC, some other brand, their setups are different. So don't use these instructions for those products because they may or may not work, and they might run into problems. Also, the reason I'm making this video is a lot of you didn't want to deal with plugging these into your computer and configuring Betaflight, and because the EMAX products are all consistent and will work with this transmitter, I've discovered that you don't have to actually plug this into Betaflight. You can just bind it to the transmitter and make sure you change your channel on the goggles, and you can go and fly it. Both this one and the Babyhawk 2, I've checked it out already, and it seems to be working. First things first, go ahead and power on your transmitter. Go ahead and power on the Nanohawk X. Now, a bit of a warning here, I am doing this with the props on. I do know what I'm doing, so not expecting any problems, but for those of you guys who are beginners, I highly recommend you take the props off just in case something goes wrong and you end up the quad arming itself accidentally, and then you're going to have some issues flying away and may possibly hurting yourself. So please be sure to take your props off before you do this. So on the radio, you want to make sure that all the switches are up and away. Basically, that's in the off position. You don't want them down. You want them away, and then that'll be basically the unarmed positions. So on the Nanohawk X, after you've powered it on, you're going to have these red and blue blinking lights in there on the flight controller. The bind button is that little button right there. So after you powered it on, you're going to press the bind button. So you're going to press and hold the bind button for 2 seconds, and you should have a solid blue light. So it's in bind mode now. And then the transmitter, you want to press and hold in the 2 inner trim buttons here. Get a beep. It's flashing red and green. And then on the Nanohawk X, so the blue light will go flashing, which means it's bound. So at this point, you want to go ahead and power cycle everything. So go ahead and unplug the Nanohawk X. Power down the transmitter. Turn the transmitter back on. And we'll go ahead and plug in the Nanohawk X again. And you should have a solid blue light there, which means it should be bound. Go ahead and I'll just arm it here. It's the arming switch is going to be this one here. And on all the models, arming is going to be on this switch here, which is aux1. aux2 is over here, which is going to be for your modes. So you have angle, horizon, and acro mode. Your beeper is over here on this switch, and then your turtle mode is on this switch. So that's consistent for this model, the Tinyhawk 3, and then the same modes will be on the Babyhawk 2. All right, so next we want to make sure that the goggles or the screen is connected to the video transmitter, and it should be on race band 4. So you can see here I have on race band 8, so we're going to change this to race band 4. Okay, so you can just change your channels and bands over here just by pressing the channel button. That'll go from 8 to 4. You just keep pressing that, and then you see it's on race band 4 now. And we have video from the quad. Alright, so next up is the Babyhawk 2, and this is the analog version, obviously, because we have analog goggles. If you have the DJI version and you want to get the DJI goggles, you can still use this transmitter with this receiver if you get the FreeSky version. I'm not sure if the DJI version comes with this FreeSky receiver or not, because I think the one that I had did not come with the receiver, so you may have to add a separate receiver. So these instructions are really going to be best for using the analog goggles with the analog version of the quad. I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen with the DJI version because I don't think that comes with this receiver. So just something to keep in mind. You'll have to, go some other route if you're going to be going DJI and want to be using this transmitter. Anyway, so if you get the analog version, you get the FreeSky version of the Babyhawk 2. You'll get this tiny, it's called the Tiny D8 receiver, and the bind button here is on the side. It's actually, I pulled it off of there's like an adhesive right there on the flight controller. I pulled that off here so we can take a closer look at the receiver. Now to get the receiver into binding mode, it is a little bit tricky here because you have to press and hold this bind button while you power on the quad. So I'm going to be using this V-Fly smoke stopper here. It has a little button on here that'll send power to the quad. It's a little bit easier than trying to plug in the battery connections. And so I'm going to plug in my battery into the smoke stopper. And I'll link the video to this as well in the description if you want to check it out. And then I'll plug in the battery and smoke stopper into the quad. And you can see the quad's not powered on. So I'm going to press and hold the bind button here. It's a little tricky getting the button to work on this one as it's very tiny. So while holding the bind button down, I'm going to power on the quad. And you can see we have a solid green light. That means it's in binding mode. Go back to the transmitter and go into binding mode on the transmitter. You can see there it's flashing now. The receiver is flashing red and green, where the green light's solid but the red light's flashing, which means it's binding. So go ahead and now power cycle everything. Go ahead and turn off the quad. And turn down the transmitter. Turn the transmitter back on. And turn on the quad. Alright, so now we have a solid green light, which means we're bound. And I'm going to arm this here on the bench. I have a smoke stopper on here, so it's not going to go totally crazy in terms of the motor. Again, take the props off, but the smoke stopper will prevent it from flying. Go ahead and I'll arm it. So I checked it already. The modes and everything are the same on this one as on the Nanohawk X, so all the switches will work the same as it does on the Tinyhawk 3 and also the Nanohawk X. So you see it's bound. I didn't have to plug it into the computer, and you should just be able to go and fly it. So arming on this switch here, and you can change your modes on this switch over here. Go and check the video transmitter and see if we have a signal. I think this one, this one is already, again, it's on R4. So it's, you can see it's on channel R4, raceband 4. And I've already changed the monitor. I believe the Tinyhawk 3 should already come on raceband 4, so this whole process of changing the channel probably isn't going to be necessary unless you switch to a different channel like I did. Anyway, that should do it for this video. You should be able to get this going on both the Nanohawk X and the Babyhawk 2. And you have a lot of different quads to choose from. and still be able to use the transmitter and goggles. And this is still, I think, the best ready to fly kit to get started if you don't have anything. And this transmitter and these goggles are pretty good that you can fly a lot of other models, including these bigger ones like the Babyhawk II, because it is more of a hobby grade transmitter than a toy grade transmitter that came with previous ready to fly kits, and also a lot of other ready to fly kits out there that don't come with very good transmitters, which justifies the higher price of the Tinyhawk II. So if you're considering, starting in FPV, I highly recommend getting the Tinyhawk III ready to fly kit. Start off with that, and then if you want to advance to other models a little bit bigger later down the road, you can definitely do that, and it's very easy to do, and you still don't have to connect this up to Betaflight. You just have to follow the instructions I laid out in this video, and you should be able to fly these other models without having to connect anything. And if you want to see how these fly, I didn't change any of the PID tunes. They're just stock PID tunes, the way that you would fly them if you follow the instructions in this video. If you enjoyed the video, please give this video a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.